Tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
We seek wisdom, understanding, insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy while working in the best interests of our community.
Kia ora.
Apologies, I've received apologies from Councillor John Watson, who's ill today. Are there any other apologies? I'll move that we accept those apologies. Have we a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Professor Collins. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Declaration of interest. Are there any councillors? Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, and Councillor Hulse. 10B and 11A6. We won't remove ourselves from the room, and for standing orders, understanding orders, we can just go to the gallery.
That's correct. It just requires you to be away from the table at the time
and
that
not
those
take part
votes
in any
are taken, and likewise for Councillor Penny Hulse.
Yes.
Any other declarations of interest? Confirmation of the minutes. We've got two sets of minutes for confirmation, the 25th of May 2017, the 1st of June. Can I have somebody move that? Councillor Simpson, seconded Councillor Sayers. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Petitions, no petitions today. There has been a petition we've received from Save Chamberlain Park, and that will be referred to the next ordinary meeting because we don't have a petitions section on the day that we confirm our annual plan and budget. No public input section today, no local board input section, no extraordinary items that I've been notified of, no notices of motion. So we come now to the adoption of the annual plan and annual budget for 2017-2018. Councillors, as you're aware, this is the final technical step in a journey that started late last year. The Council voted earlier this month on the 1st of June to introduce a budget which keeps our rates around the level of inflation and provides relief from the double-digit inflation, rate inflation that we've seen in some previous years. It broadens our revenue base and takes some of the pressure off ratepayers, and it helps some of our most vulnerable Aucklanders. Today we go through what is essentially a mechanical exercise of passing the final vote, and then we can turn our attention to the big challenge ahead of us, which is the long-term plan 2018 to 2028. We have already debated at length the issues set out in this budget, and we did that before and during the passing of the decisions on the budget on the 1st of June. Yesterday all of us had the opportunity at a workshop on the budget to ask any further questions, and today we are simply voting on adopting the budget, and then of course we need to formally set the rate for 2017-2018. That is a legislative requirement that we are required to do before the 1st of July, so that is something that we need to pass today. Obviously, if we fail to do that, there are some quite serious consequences. It affects our ability to financially comply with legislative requirements and duties, and our ability to comply with contractual commitments. We would have to disclose that non-compliance to the New Zealand Stock Exchange, and it would also put capital projects and borrowing at risk. I say that because while the exercise today is simply procedural, it's also a very important exercise and a milestone for all of us. Can I thank councillors once again for the robust debate, the arguments to and fro that were generally entered into, I think, in an absolutely appropriate manner and with a robust debate. And I thank councillors for all the thought that's gone into this annual plan. It's been a challenging process, I think, for every one of us, but it has achieved a result that I think we can rightly be proud of. Following the procedural vote on the annual plan, we will not have time to relax. We'll be moving straight into the even more challenging task of putting together our next long-term plan to cover the next decade. So I'll move the recommendations for item 10 for the adoption of the annual plan 2017-18, on which we will vote separately, A to D. Do I have a seconder? I see Chair of the Finance Committee, Ross Clow. Right. If there's no debate and discussion on that, I will first of all move... Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Walker, did you...
Yeah, just an issue that I raised with you, Mr Mayor, and that is around being able to vote against the part of the annual plan that goes to the accommodation targeted rate.
Yeah, there are different ways that councillors can do that. They can move in the appropriate place. They can vote against. They can't move any amendment. No councillor can move amendments to the budget. That's very clearly set out in the rules that apply to all of us. But you can vote against that. That's also clearly set out in the rules. Normally under item 11, where it's set out separately, we would take those things together. But the whole of the rating package together. But if any councillor insists, they can take an item separately. The alternative way of dealing with it, and sometimes the tidier way that's more normally applied, is that you simply record your opposition to a particular item, which any councillor is welcome to do. So if the councillor takes that into account. There's no further discussion.
Just one.
Sorry, Councillor Casey.
There was a number of questions asked yesterday. All of them were answered for me apart from one, and the officer said the RFA will contact me directly, and they haven't, so I haven't got an answer to my question, which was a breakdown of the zoo infrastructure spend of 12.4 million.
Yeah. We will make sure that the RFA gets back to you, councillor, on that. It's not something that should hold our process up, but I'm happy for you to have that information. I think probably, given the time frame, they just haven't got back to you yet, but we will push that on your behalf.
I won't be supporting that part of the budget then.
That's an issue for you to determine.
So I can just say that.
You can record that your opposition to that part of the budget on that basis. Okay, I'll move recommendation A, which relates to agreeing to the Te Puna Maunga Authority operational plan. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. Recommendation B, adopt the amended revenue and financing policy, reflecting the decisions we made on the 1st of June. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye.
No.
To the contrary, no. Carried. Recommendation C, adopt the annual budget 2017-18, the annual plan, including the 21 local board agreements. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number D.
My vote there against the zoo budget of 12.4 million.
Okay. If we can ensure that Councillor Casey's view is recorded there. Item...
And
sorry.
my vote against the accommodation targeted rate at the appropriate point.
Thank you, Councillor Wayne Walker. Any other councillor wishing to record their vote? Councillor Mike Lee. Against the... Councillor Lee, I'm sorry, which part are you recording your vote against? B. All. Oh, all, okay. And Councillor Sayers?
Against the property, the accommodation tax.
The accommodation tax. Councillor Cooper?
No, I'm being consistent, Mr Mayor. Against the...
I'm against the accommodation.
Yep,
okay.
Business differential postponement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker?
Against the accommodation tax.
Right. Anyone else?
Accommodation.
And Councillor Newman?
And Councillor Stewart?
Councillor Stewart.
Councillor
The accommodation tax.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Recommendation D, delegating authority and responsibility for any minor editorial changes to the Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee and the Group Chief Finance Officer. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. We come now to item number 11, which is the setting of the rates. And as I just explained to Councillor Wayne Walker before, I am advised by officials that the recommendation should be taken as a whole. That doesn't stop you recording, asking for your name to be recorded against a particular item again if you felt that necessary. But it's best and usual practice, I'm advised, across local authorities for all rates to be struck together. Because we've just passed the annual plan, which contains the funding and the rating package, we've determined our expenditure needs. We now have to strike the rates to meet those needs. So I'll move those recommendations. Councillor Clow to second it as Chair of the Finance Committee. I will put recommendation A as 1, but people can record thereafter if they have an objection to any particular item. I'll put recommendation A 1 to 22, I think. Let me get to it. 21. All those in favour, please say...
Mr Chairman, I've had my
Sorry,
hand
Councillor
up.
Fletcher. I'm sorry, I didn't see. Councillor
Chairman,
Chris Fletcher.
I just want to query, when is the opportunity for us to speak to any of these items? I appreciate that you want to get the meeting over and done with, but if we wish to speak, where you've put them as a whole, what's the process that you're proposing for the discussion that we might have?
Councillors are free to take a call, but as I foreshadowed, we have debated in detail every one of these recommendations on a number of occasions, and we have debated and voted on them on the 1st of June. And today, as you're aware, it's more a mechanical process of simply formalising the budget. And that, I think, is the general consensus around the table. But
Well, Mr. Chairman,
if the councillor has a specific item they wish to raise, she is, of course, free to raise it.
Well, Mr Chairman, I would like to raise the targeted accommodation rate, because whilst you say that we had the debate on the 1st of June, I discovered yesterday that there are going to be further exemptions. And I think that this is evidence of the fact that this, as a proposal, was never properly thought through. The fact that you are now seeking to exempt the homeless housing associated with this, which is government funded, there are a whole range of aspects to this that I think require just a little bit, in the interests of good public process. I would have liked the officers today to have been available if I had further queries on those matters. So I just welcome, I'm not seeking to be difficult, but I just want to know what you can allow for in terms of some further discussion on the changes that you are now proposing to the targeted accommodation rate and the rationale behind that, because it has been a matter of some controversy, and you might, for those who are interested in this, they might say, oh, well, it's fine with us as long as somebody else is paying the rich guys, the hoteliers, and I would remind you that a lot of those moteliers and hoteliers are those that we share time with in our churches and our community and across the board. These are
Mr.
people...
Chair, can I just ask a question? Sorry, Councillor
So,
Fletcher.
a point of order, Councillor Hulse.
I'll call it, I think it is a point of order. If we're going to debate this, Councillor Cooper and I need to step
Go
away,
out,
so
yeah.
I'm not too sure whether we, at what
Staying
stage,
here or not.
for transparency, while we even debate whether this will be discussed or not, I think we might just step
I
aside.
think if you just step back from
We
the
will.
table, that would comply with standing orders. I'm sorry for the interruption,
That's
Councillor
okay.
Fletcher.
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
No, that's fine. So my question is, if we're going to be backtracking, because there were clearly flaws in the original proposal, I think that they do need some airlight today so that we can come to understand them. There is no desire by anyone to thwart this budget going through, but there is a desire to understand the rationale behind this targeted accommodation rate. As somebody who strongly supports targeted rates, it's one of the few tools that we have in our toolbox. We mustn't abuse it. And I think that if we are seen to have used it unwisely, it's going to make it very, very hard to use these for the future. So I would just like your guidance so that I know when I can take a call and speak to and ask questions of those issues in and around the targeted accommodation rate that leave me highly uncomfortable.
Thank you, Councillor. We did have this, excuse me, we did have this discussion yesterday, as you're aware, and an explanation was given. But if I very briefly just repeat that explanation, we have a process of consultation, and it's been ongoing consultation for 6 months, actually. And through that process of consultation, we are made aware of areas that might be added to what we're doing or subtracted from what we're doing in relation to the unfortunately growing trend for some motels to be used for housing the homeless and paid for by the Ministry of Social Development. These are not visitors to the city that the targeted rate is targeted at. These are Aucklanders who are homeless. And the reason for removing that, I think, is predominantly around that. So that was the explanation on that change, and some further discussion, of course, took place on that yesterday.
Yes, but Mr. Chairman, we have Aucklanders, because of the size and because of the congestion issues in Auckland, we have businesses where Aucklanders may actually choose motel accommodation from one side of the city to the other. Now, they are not visitors to the city. They are often, for the purposes of business travel, these are people. So I would really like to be able to just explore a little further so I understand. You said yesterday, and it was a workshop, it wasn't a meeting, you said yesterday, you know, the purposes of your targeted accommodation rate was to try and get some user pay system with regards to the costs of ATEED, but that we know that a lot of those motels are not going to be the beneficiaries of any investments that ATEED make. The second part of that yesterday, you said, was that it's about paying for the transport infrastructure of Auckland. And of all people, you will have sympathy in terms of seeing tools to fund the transport infrastructure that Auckland needs. But then I don't understand why there are exemptions in certain parts of the region that are probably going to benefit the most in terms of transport infrastructure. So there are some considerable anomalies in what you're proposing, and I would just like these to be explained to me. That, you know, I don't understand at the moment. I don't see the evidence to back up what you are proposing here.
We can have another debate on that. I think everybody around this table has felt that this has been debated to death. So I'm satisfied that answers have been given over the course of the debate. Obviously, Councillor, you're not satisfied. That's an area that we disagree on. That's your right, but it's not my intention to prolong this debate unnecessarily at this time on the rating issue. If councillors are insistent on speaking, I will apply the standing order that talks about once we've had 3 speeches for or 3 against, I'll ask for a procedural motion that the motion be put. But I think we've had the debate. I think everybody would regard that as being a fair ruling. So if there is no further discussion, I'll put the... Sorry. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I've just got a question about the accommodation targeted rate, and it follows on from the issues that Councillor Fletcher was raising, and that is, has the amount that we expect to collect from the accommodation targeted rate changed since our earlier vote? And the particular areas that concern me are issues around hardship, where it may be that moteliers, hoteliers have got issues that they can prove around that. Issues around strata titles, where it's not possible to pass the rate on, and that can be substantiated. And also the issue around the hotel, for example, or motel that may have things that don't go to the accommodation targeted rate, and they include kitchens and restaurants and bars and managers' accommodation and all of the things. And all of the things that we've been told need to be effectively taken out of the capital value to arrive at the accommodation targeted rate. So I'd just like some certainty around where we're headed there.
Okay, for the sake of being helpful, I think officials would indicate that the sum set out originally at 13.45 million after we'd adopted the changed format, that has not been altered. You were advised yesterday there is a remissions policy for those where it would be unfair to apply that rate. And in terms of other facilities not directly related to the provision of the room for visitors, such as the manager's accommodation or the convention facility, those are not included in the calculation of the rate. Those were the three answers to your questions. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Your Worship. I contribute to this because I think it was me who was quite outspoken on the issue of the motels which have become a place of last resort for people who are struggling with permanent accommodation and who are sent there by MSD, and that those rooms are funded by the New Zealand taxpayer. After the debate that was had, I approached officers about this matter, and I do want to acknowledge Andrew Duncan and the help that he has provided me, because there are a number of motels in my ward, in Maniarewa, where currently a number of the rooms are being funded by MSD. And so the request was made for consideration for an exemption. So I would expect that after today, that the accommodation provider targeted rate is going to be adopted, and I'll be voting against that if that can be recorded under Roman numeral 6. But there will be an exemption for those providers in my ward, and I would expect that there would be providers elsewhere as well who should be considered as per the remissions policy. And I think, I think there's some compelling reasons for that, Your Worship, although I fully accept that there will be some colleagues who don't agree with that exemption. I think the point to raise, Your Worship, is that when you look at the initial proposal, which was for a $27.8 million targeted rate, and then you look at the hybrid Tier 1, Tier 2 model with Zone A, Zone B, down to $13.45 million, so much political blood and capital has been shed for what is really quite a modest sum, and more will have to be shed, I suspect, in the future, because I would expect that the industry will take this through the courts and test the validity of it. But with respect to remissions and with respect to the carve-outs and the questions that are raised by Wayne Walker are relevant, I'm not certain yet as to what the precise quantum of revenue that will be realised from this targeted rate actually will be. I have one potential hotel coming in my ward at 770R Great South Road. That's the former site reserve land next to the Whitewater Rafting Centre. That is based on a strata title model. If that model is to proceed, there has to be a remission, because actually that's not a hotel as we would traditionally understand it. It's a combination of strata title lease apartments and a hotel, and I don't think that they necessarily should be fully captured by this targeted rate. And there'll be so many more of those particular options out there, Your Worship. So, you know, 13.45 million is, in my view, probably actually a theoretical sum at this point in time. There's already remissions coming in Manirewa that will reduce that amount, not by much, because actually the capital value of those motels is not significant. But even now, as we strike this rate today, based on the understanding of it and how it's defined in the agenda and how it's defined in the draft annual plan, that to me sounds like a rate that is still highly complex and will trigger more administrative challenges in terms of its application against the remissions policy, which will need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And the officers are not fully clear yet as to the extent to which the remissions policy will apply in all cases. They will need to be considered as applications come in, and I'm going to have to write some more letters following today because there are owners of properties that should absolutely be exempted from it.
Thank you. I'll put the motion, item number, I'm sorry, I've a comment, this will be the last comment because that will be 3 speeches in a row against the resolution, but Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for taking my call. I've asked for this call just because I want to, I guess, air and record to my colleagues the reason why I'm voting against, just so it's very clear, because I've thought more heavily about it since our last debates. You know, this isn't a bed tax or pillow tax like we experience when we travel overseas, where it's a line item added to the bill as a surcharge, usually based on the percentage of the room rate that we pay for the room. It's not that, it's a property tax. And what concerns me, and why I'm voting against it, is that suddenly forces the hoteliers and moteliers, Mr Mayor, to work out in advance the number of guests that are going to come through their business in any given year. So which is probably very, very difficult for them. Impossible, my colleague says. So I just think that I agree with the aims, Mr Mayor, of what you're trying to achieve through this in terms of moving the cost from the general rates into the industry sectors that benefit from it. But I think we've narrowed it too much just onto a specific sector, being the accommodation sector. So it's my opinion that the financial instrument we're trying to use, this targeted rate, is too blunt and inappropriate for the reasons I've just given, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the resolution...
Mr Mayor, a question, please.
Sorry, I'm trying to find out where that's coming from. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, question, please. And I've asked this question before, but it's never been answered to my satisfaction, and I think to the satisfaction of people who are in opposition to this targeted rate. But in the 2012 and again in the 2015 long-term plan, the reason why ATEED was funded from general rates was because it was seen...
Mr Mayor, I'm waiting to hear the question. Is this going to be a speech, then a question?
It can only be a question at this stage. We've already exhausted under standing orders the speeches against the motion. So if the member likes to make it as a question, but I note that you said you've asked that question several times before, but it's never been answered to your satisfaction. It may never be, but you're entitled to ask a question.
Well, I thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Collins. Patience, please.
Thank you, and I'd like to hear the question, Councillor Quacks.
So if you could come to the question, please, Councillor.
So, given that that the general public of Auckland, the people of Auckland, have always been seen as the beneficiaries of the
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I have asked for the question.
I think the councillor should now come to his question. We don't need a long preamble. We simply need the question.
Okay, I want to be clear.
I think we're clear. We just want the question. That's not what we're not clear about.
Very good. Okay. So, what has changed?
Congratulations.
What has changed that now it's not the people of Auckland who are the beneficiaries of this rate, but just 300 motels and hotels. What has been the change that has necessitated or has informed us that it's not the public of Auckland, but 300 hotels and motels who now seem to be the benefits of the visitor attraction of 18?
I think what's changed, and what 2/3 of the people in your ward would agree with, is that we've seen example after example of where the accommodation industry has put up rates by several $100s a night whenever we hold a major event like the Lions Tour or the World Masters Games. That's the answer. Right, I want to now put the vote. All those in favour...
Division.
By division, we'll take it by division. All those in favour of item number 11, setting our rates.
They've got to be taken part.
Oh, sorry, I'm calling the division. I should have left that to Sandra. We'll
Mr.
take
Chairman,
it.
can we please note that, even though it's almost impossible, that we aren't really voting for 11A6, but we're
Yep.
voting for everything else?
That is possible.
Or not.
I've had
Thank
legal
you.
advice that councillors
Just
Cooper
wanted
and Hulse...
publicly noted, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
thank you.
That councillors Cooper and Hulse can vote on the broader item, but will record that they abstained on item 11.6.
Mr.
Not
Mr.
abstain.
No.
Sorry, that you recused yourself,
Yep.
and therefore your vote will not count on that. Okay, division has been called. I now have to move.
What?
to-
Are we doing, we're doing A, are
Not
we
so
doing
quick.
1, 2, 3? So how do we differentiate those aspects
I
that we
can,
support?
I can if you like. I will put it in two separate parts. 11 excluding A6, and then I will take A6 separately. I think that might
Then we can go
And-
out.
that might help councillors in their vote. So
Mr. Chairman, the issue of the deferral of the business differential, how are you going to treat that? Because there are also those of us who may not believe that that is the
You-
right thing to do.
you can record, as I announced earlier, you can record that your vote is against that. That would be the most straightforward way of doing it. So I'm now going to put recommendation 11A excluding 11A6. Do you still want that by division? Yes. No. Okay, well, just on the voices then. We'll take that one on the voices and the second one on a division. All those in favour of recommendations 11A excluding 6, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
And noted against,
Okay.
which one? Oh, God, sorry.
No. Councillor Cooper noted against the
The
differential.
business differential, thank you.
Which one's
Councillor
that?
Fletcher noted against.
Which one's that? What number is
Councillor Fletcher, were you wanting
Yes,
a vote noted
yes.
against?
Yes,
Which-
I'll go through with
Okay,
Sandra
you'll-
those
you'll go
matters.
through with
There are
Sandra.
a number
That's
that I
fine.
think are flawed.
Okay, I will... Sorry, Sharon Stewart.
the hiatus
Yep.
on business differential?
Which one was it, Councillor Stewart?
It was the accommodation number.
That's been
Separately.
taken
That's to
separately.
come.
That's been taken separately. I'll put that now. Okay? So I'll now put recommendation 11A6 relating to the targeted rate on accommodation.
By division?
And we'll do that by division as requested.
Right, councillors, you're voting on 11A6. Your worship.
In favour?
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Clow.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
For.
Councillor Cooper. Oh, no, sorry, no Councillor Cooper. Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Denise Lee.
What?
Councillor Mike Lee.
No.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Quacks.
Against.
Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Against.
I declare that part of the recommendation, A6, carried by 10 votes to 8 votes. Invite the councillors who have moved away from the table to move back to the table, and we will now move to item number 12, which is the approval of the City Rail Link Agreement. And just point out to councillors, I'm sure you're aware of it, that the substantive decision on this, the substantive discussion on this will be in confidence because it's commercial in confidence, but this is part of the open session. Perhaps I might ask our Chief Executive, Stephen Town, just to speak briefly to this.
Thanks, Your Worship. What we'll be delivering for you today is a set of approvals and noting resolutions in the public excluded section, but to confirm in this open part of the meeting that we've delivered a suite of documents and agreements that are consistent with the City Rail Link funding heads of agreement that we signed with the government in 2016. So you don't have any concerns being put forward in the public excluded section which departs from the principles and the agreements that we reached with the Crown as part of that heads of agreement. So we're in a pretty happy place.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Is there any discussion in this part of the agenda? I think what the Chief Executive has just confirmed is that the agreement that we are asking the governing body to concur with is consistent, fully consistent with the heads of agreement that Council supported back in September 2016. Councillor Darby.
Just a clarification, it's on our public excluded, and I think there's a lot of public interest in this arrangement. Can the Chief Executive just tell us briefly why we need to carry this through the public excluded part of the agenda?
So we have a counterparty in the Crown, so we're still negotiating and we haven't concluded that. We aim to do that today. And we also have the names of the 4 new directors in the public excluded agenda, and again there'll be a joint announcement once those 4 directors have signed up for the offer of being directors on the company.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, Mr Chairman, this is one of those occasions that I can genuinely feel joyful that we have worked so incredibly hard to get to this point. To get the government on board, to share the costs equally, to look at a future that will, I think, go some way to relieving the congestion of Auckland. So I'm happy to move these recommendations, and in doing so, I'd like to acknowledge the many people who have actually made this possible. As I walked up Albert Street last night and looked at the cuts that are taking place in Albert Street, I thought of all the pain of the battles that took place to get us to this point. But the people of Auckland will look back and smile approvingly on what has been the right decisions, the courageous decisions that were taken before the government were partners on board. But this is an occasion where I think Auckland Transport should be acknowledged. Good people like Jeff Dangerfield should be acknowledged. We've had some excellent minds that have brought all of the parties together, and I really would like to salute them today, and particularly Chris Meal, who has been charged with the delivery of this. This is a really good day for New Zealand, not just for Auckland.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fletcher. I'll second that motion, which is really to note, the recommendation is to note that we've entered into the heads of agreement and that the agreements have been negotiated. And I'd also like to acknowledge Auckland Transport. This agreement, of course, passes control across to a joint body through a sponsors agreement between ourselves and the government. But up to date, Auckland Transport has made the decisions and carried out those decisions effectively and efficiently. And I'd like to acknowledge and personally put on the record my thanks to Auckland Transport and those involved in getting the process to this point. And I'd like to include in that acknowledgement my predecessor, Mayor Len Brown, who worked incredibly hard for 6 years to get this project up at a point when that was not on the agenda of the government and the government wasn't keen to support it. So I think we can applaud that we've got this far and maybe wish that if we'd started 5 years ago, we'd be opening it next year, and that would be even better. Right. Councillor Mike Lee.
Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge the former Auckland Regional Council which began this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That should be taken on board as well. If there is no further discussion on this section of the report, I will move the... Oh, it's been moved and seconded, the recommendation. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. And at this point, I will formally move that we exclude the public for the reasons that have been discussed. And we'll just take a break for a couple of minutes while the room is cleared.